figured I'll let the car idle so you guys can hear this nice comp cams camshaft, because honestly it's my favorite part of the car, so why not? We'll sneak this in at the end of the video just for the guys that like to hear a good chop. What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another Crown Racing Co. video. Today we're going to be talking about tuning your 351 or 302. This video is going to apply to carbureted and EFI guys. This car behind me started its life carbureted. It's had a 351 in it for 4 years, and it's had 3 different 351s in it. Now it is EFI with the Holley standalone. So I'm going to be talking to both carb and EFI setups for tuning. This video is basically going to be going over your AFR and your ignition timing numbers that you're shooting for. And I will go a little bit into depth of how you're changing your ignition timing for carb guys with the mechanical advance, and then I'll show you guys on the computer with the Holley standalone how to change your fuel tables and spark tables. This can be a more general video just for any setup you guys have over there, whatever cylinder heads, cam intake you're running, your compression ratio, doesn't matter. These are going to be normal numbers for a safe tune, and I'll talk about hot tunes later. I'll talk about hot tunes in this video as well, but you'll just know. I'll mention with the ignition timing that we're getting to the edge of how far you want to go, but we'll start off talking about safe tunes. Honestly, tuning these cars is not very hard. Mechanical advance, you're just changing springs inside of your distributor and a little bushing for your max advance possible. And then for EFI, you're just stabbing keys on a laptop. Not hard at all either, especially the Holley standalone. The software is so easy to tune, like a monkey could do it. It's not hard. And then, what I'm going to be talking about today is my experience of running these 351s for 4 years. I know what works, I know what doesn't. My brother has a Corvette, and I've been watching the tunes on his car for ignition timing and fuel, and I'll just say these car engines are not the same as LS platforms at all. These Fords like way more ignition timing than any 5.3 or LS platform will. But anyway, I'm starting to ramble, so let's get into the video and start talking about tuning your 351 or 302. Also, before we get started, please do me a favor and smash the like button. It really helps a small channel like us. And don't forget to hit the subscribe button. Most of you guys watching this video are not subscribed to the channel. Like 10% of you guys are actually subscribed. It'd really help a small channel like us if you take a second, hit that subscribe button. This is going to be some really good information that's going to help you a lot and make tuning your engine way of a faster process than it would have been without knowing this stuff. So before you start tuning your 351 or 302, you're going to need 2 things. You're going to need an AFR sensor or a wideband, and you're also going to need a timing light for a wideband or an AFR. Wideband, AFR, they're the same thing. I'm just saying the 2 different words. Go to Summit Racing, get the AEM AFR sensor. Comes with the Bosch sensor and the gauge that will obviously interpret what the sensor is reading. And it's like $160, and it comes with a bung as well, so you can weld it into your exhaust. Just go buy it. Don't even try tuning your car without an AFR sensor. You can try and read spark plugs all day, but you're not going to get as close as using AFR sensor. For the timing light, I recommend that you guys spend the extra money and get a timing light where you can set the ignition vance on the light, and that way you only have to look at the TDC mark on the harmonic balancer. Because if you get the cheaper gun, you have to read the timing, the degree marks on the harmonic bouncer, and the numbers are really small, the lines are really small. Sometimes it's hard to read the lines, so it's easier just to set the advance on the gun and look for the main big 0 TDC mark on the harmonic balancer. So everything I'm going to be talking about is involving gasoline, whether it's 87 or 93 octane. With the 10% ethanol, normally like what you get at the pump. So we're just talking about pump gas. So for idle, you guys all know that stoic for gasoline is 14.7. For carbureted guys, your car's not going to idle good unless you have it running in around the 12.5 range. For AFR, carbs just like to run rich, especially at idle. So for carb guys, stick around 12.5 to 13 to 1 for an AFR ratio. And then for ignition timing, stock ignition timing for a 302 or 351 from Ford is 10 degrees. If you have an aftermarket camshaft in it, no matter how big or how small it is, I recommend you stick around 13 to 15 degrees ignition advance. That's your base advance at idle. And then for EFI guys, obviously you're going to tune your idle to be 14.7, and then you could pick your ignition timing between 10 to 15 degrees, whether you have a stock cam or not. You'll know what ignition timing is good for the engine at idle because you'll tell it just runs good. Normally, if you're not quite sure what you want to do, advance your distributor timing until the engine increases in RPM. Once it stops to climb in RPM, back it off a little bit, and that's normally a good range to start with. You're most likely going to be around 13 degrees base timing. And then for going on to part throttle, this is basically you're in gear and you're under 3,000 RPM and you're just barely cracking the throttle. You're normally going to want to be around 13 to 1 AFR, and then of course your ignition timing. This is those high load conditions and you're kind of bogging the engine in gear. So this is where you're most susceptible to knock. So you're going to want to keep your ignition timing at least less than 27 degrees if you're less than 3,000 RPM part throttle, and your AFR around 12.5 to 12.7 will be okay. If you hear the car like knocking, and if anyone wonders what knock sounds like, it sounds like you taking two rocks and clapping them together. If you hear that, take timing out of the car or run a higher octane fuel and you should be okay. And then of course for wide open throttle, the most important part of tuning, and really the only area we care about for carbureted guys. So we're talking about a safe tune here, and then later on I'll talk about how to make as much power as possible out of these motors. For a safe tune, I like, depending on if your compression ratio is 10.5 to 1 and less, you can run up to, I like to see you guys at like 35 degrees timing, and your AFR set to about 12.0 to 1 flat. If you want to be really safe, like for instance, this is my drift car here, I actually set my wide open throttle to 11.5 to 1 because I want it pig rich, because it's spending a lot of time in the higher RPMs. And when you quickly crack throttle, just having it richer gives me in the safer zone of making sure I don't lean out if I fuel starve when I'm turning around, going around turns. Gives me a little buffer of error in case I fuel starve the engine while I'm turning. And then for carbureted guys, those numbers are going to be the exact same, because that's what you're tuning for wide open throttle. About 12.0 to 12.3 and around 32 to 35 degrees ignition advance. Just so you guys are aware, 35 degrees ignition advance at wide open throttle is getting to the top of how far you want to go. The last engine that was in this car, I blew it up running 37 degrees ignition timing, and it lasted a whole summer. So you can do 37 degrees ignition timing and get away with it for sure. Just don't run the car at 37 degrees all the time. And in most of your guys' setups, you're actually not going to gain that much power going from 35 to 37, so just stay at 35 degrees. Now, one thing that's worth mentioning is that having your different compression ratios, your camshafts, and your intake manifolds are going to change how you want to tune the car. And between those three mods that I just listed, I'll tell you guys how you're going to tune for them in particular. If you have a dual plane intake manifold, you're going to run the car richer than you would a single plane intake manifold. This car has a dual plane intake manifold. When I pull the spark plugs, I can tell that the back cylinders are running richer than the front cylinders. And when this last engine blew up, it was cylinder number 1. And so basically what I'm getting at is a dual plane intake manifold is not very good at giving an even fuel mixture to all the cylinders, so you're going to want to run richer, about 0.5 of an AFR richer. So if you want to be running at 12.5 AFR at wide open throttle, you should set your tune to run at 12.0 to 1 at wide open throttle. That way you know for sure all your cylinders are getting enough fuel and they're not going to lean out and get too hot. For a big aftermarket camshaft, you're really only affected at idle when it comes to this, and you're just going to run more ignition timing. And obviously with an aftermarket camshaft, the engine's going to want to rev faster, so you'll want to make sure that you compensate for that with your throttle enrichment, and that means how much fuel is being added when you open up the throttle blades. And then finally, for compression for your engine, if you're 10.5 to 1, I already explained ignition timing. The AFR numbers stay the same no matter what your compression is. If you're 11 to 1 and higher in compression, you're going to want to stay under 33 degrees at wide open throttle. So just going over some part recommendations, if you're going to be doing a carbureted setup, I highly recommend that you guys do Holley carbs. The reason why is because you don't have to worry about the needle and spring kind of tuning that the Edelbrock has. The Holley carb is very straightforward. Get a double pumper, which means mechanical secondaries, no vacuum assist. Stay away from that stuff unless you're an automatic transmission. If you're in a manual car, you want mechanical secondaries, you want a double pumper. That way you have the most tuning ability possible for throttle enrichment, along with it's just going to run better for a manual car having manual secondaries. And then for EFI, personally, the only EFI standalone that I've used for the Ford platform is Holley, and I recommend Holley all day long. Alright guys, that's going to be it for this video. I hope you appreciate all that information we were just talking about. Me and my brother got a drift event next weekend in Wisconsin, so stay tuned to watch our next drift video coming soon. I love the support from all you guys. I appreciate it. I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.